Hello and welcome to episode 188 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, an energy policy expert expects each nuclear reactor to cost 10.4 billion British pounds to decommission. And I've got a solution, Brian. Just put a bottle deposit of 10.4 billion pounds on each new reactor.
Ooh, a deposit on oil wells would be good too. Frito-Lay has unveiled their first all-electric delivery truck network. Now I just need them to work on a drone that delivers chips directly from the bag to my mouth.
Can't be far off. And Nigeria has abruptly ended subsidies for fossil fuels, causing gas prices to triple since May. And Nigerian princes everywhere are even more desperate for you to send money to them in their emails.
Domino's has unveiled an electric delivery bike that includes a built-in pizza oven. Now I just need them to work on a drone that delivers pizza directly from the box to my mouth.
Well, I'm sure if you're listening, they'll do it. All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Also this week, Hyundai is going to sell cars on Amazon. Brian, I think we need to get an affiliate link. Can you imagine the commission on something like that? A lot more than a router. Canada gets another $1 billion battery factory, this time on the West Coast. And what cars give you the most miles of range in an hour of charging? Edmunds looked into this. Spoiler, my Chevy Bolt is the worst. How terrible it is will surprise you. I mean, I don't really know you. You're just a person listening to the show, but I think you'll be surprised.
I imagine so. All right, so I want to talk about a clean energy lawsuit this week. So something we talk about occasionally on the show is people around the world, activists, clean energy activists, have been suing their governments, suing their utilities to try to get them to act faster on climate change. And some of these cases win, some of them don't. There was a big case in Montana that we talked about where young people took Montana to court, and that one was successful. There's been like I say, sort of a mixed bag. Sometimes these things go somewhere, sometimes they don't. But anyway, somehow we missed this story. This is from April, and it's local. There is a local story of people suing our government utility to do better on climate change. I'm not sure how we missed this story, but I
think it was mentioned in passing. In our defense, I think it was mentioned, but we didn't explore it too deeply.
Anyway, I don't recall it, but I thought since it's right here in our backyard that we should talk about it quickly here. So this is a lawsuit getting the government to try and do better on clean energy because they have lots of fossil fuels in there. We talked about this roughly 2 years ago. Our local utility announced $750 million to build a natural gas-fired power plant near Moose Jaw, one of my favorite cities, sullied with a natural gas plant.
And a bad name.
And but to produce power. And so they are seeking a more reasonable net zero target of 2035. The Crown Corporation Sask Power has said 2050 is their goal to decarbonize. But of course, that's not soon enough. And they're really just making excuses if they can't do it by 2035.
They don't want to shut anything down. Basically, they just built this natural. We knew, you and I knew, if they only came to us, Brian, if they only came to us and asked, they didn't. They were too shy.
But here's the thing. My main argument against this is really a financial one. Like, it doesn't have so much to do with climate change. Obviously, climate change is bad, but it just seemed like a terrible financial decision to keep putting money into a fossil fuel plant that is going to be obsolete very soon, possibly illegal very soon. Like, how many years of usage are they even going to get out of this thing? So I don't think you can sue your government for wasting money, because that's really kind of the government's stock and trade is, spending money poorly. But to me, that's the major issue here.
Well, this is what's happening in a lot of places. So some of these lawsuits aren't that differently worded than this one. Mm-hmm. And it is it's not just money. Of course, it's the climate is the big issue. And that's the what will have to be decided upon by the legal system is, are you endangering the lives? Are you going against what was promised in our Constitution, et cetera? But there's no promise in the Constitution not to waste our money. So that will be a legal problem.
So that's a no-go.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so the lawsuit claims that expanding gas-fired electricity generation violates Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees the right to life, liberty, and security. And if they don't care about climate change, then that is a possible violation of that part of the charter.
Oh my God, are they screwing us? I hate to talk about local politics, but
Yeah.
they are really going to, I don't know, they're going to waste our money because they want to buy nuclear reactors. They're the only people in the world who want to, invest the government that is already spending our money on the idea that small modular nuclear reactors will be a thing. And there are a lot of fans of these things. And once again, I say, what problem are you solving? Mm-hmm. Because it's so expensive. And there's just going to be such a hit on us. And I honestly think, and I'll talk about this later because we have a story on it, they have no intention of actually they just want to keep burning fossil fuels because that's who they are.
Yeah, there's a chance that these nuclear power plants will never come online, or if they do come online, it'll be, maybe 10 years later than they're expecting. And so it puts their 2050 target in jeopardy if they go too far down this road of nuclear, which takes too long and costs too much money.
And we should be decarbonizing by 2035 in the electrical system. Brian, Let me ask you this. Did you do their survey for our local utility here? They did a survey recently.
No, there's been sort of flyers going out, and I know they're having meetings where they want to talk to people about the power, but the whole thing...
Do they really, though?
No, they don't. So the whole thing just kind of makes me sick to my stomach, so I really don't want to participate because I think it would just make me
There's so
angry.
many questions in there about would you want to pay more for a clean future? And I know that they're fishing for the answer of no, and it's asked many times. It's not asked once, it's not asked twice, it's asked several times in different ways. And I know what they're getting. They want the answer. They want to take this and go to the people and say, see, you don't want to pay extra for clean energy, so we're not going to do it. We all know that clean energy is the cheapest energy and getting cheaper by the day. And if they don't get on board with this now, they should be building it now and not building natural gas plants, which won't be able to compete economically with solar and batteries alone, let alone wind mixed in, which we have plenty of here. We're the best resource of both in Canada, and we're just pissing on it. We're just pissing it away.
The natural gas plant that they announced, probably over 2 years ago now, is still not finished. Like, those things, they don't take as long as nuclear to build, but they've been building it for over 2 years now, I think. And it's still not online. So, it's be completely obsolete by the time it even opens. It's ridiculous.
Well, our government-run utility for gas has its own natural gas supply. Maybe there's some economics involved that aren't similar to other places in the world, but they haven't communicated that. They haven't even tried. But yeah, maybe, they buy it when it's cheap and store it in caverns and things and somehow work it out. I don't know. It makes me angry, and it scares the life out of me because I'm going to be an old man who won't be able to afford to live here. The only reason I live here is because it's affordable. And the whole place is going to go to crap if they blow this energy transition, which I know they're doing. And no one's going to blame them for it either. They're just going to say, it was just the way it was.
It's anyway, it's a big deal. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. There's a group of private citizens as well as Climate Justice Saskatoon that are involved in this lawsuit. The next court date is several months away. It's not going to be solved in any kind of a hurry. But thank you so much to them. I sent a donation to Climate Justice Saskatoon.
Nice.
I would urge other people to do that, or look in your local district if there are lawsuits being brought in your area against your government, against your utility to climate. I think this is one of the best ways to fight them. I mean, this utility, our electricity utility, has been around for 100 years or more, and they don't normally get sued. This is terrible.
I want to join the lawsuit. If I had any money in my bank account, I would be. Sign me up. Like, what do I do?
And if we were smarter, because when we first talked about this, over 2 years ago, this $750 million gas plant, I felt so powerless to do anything. And if I had was smart enough at the time, a lawsuit would have been the thing to do. Launch a lawsuit immediately as soon as they announced that ridiculous waste of money. But other people smarter than me have decided to do it, and best of luck to them.
Brian, I think you and I should go to law school.
Hey.
I think we're going to need to. You know what? I am going to pat myself on the back and say, James, you were right. I called it, Brian. I am a god. Elon Musk is an anti-Semite. I knew it would come out eventually.
Okay.
It's just the path that he was going down with this Twitter stuff. I'm just going to leave it there because there's a lot of BS in the world right now. I argue with my son about it all the time because he's hooked into the young people. I was listening to an interview on another podcast with Mark Maron today about how people don't even, 10 years ago, 60% of kids didn't even know what the Auschwitz was.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. Like they need to sit down and watch Schindler's List or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have this dryer vent. Okay. This has to do with my passive solar house, which is not really a passive solar house in modern standards, but it was built as one. And I wanted it to be airtight, obviously. And remember, I had a hole in it that I discovered about a year ago, which I was not impressed
there was something blocking it, so you never saw it.
Never saw it. Yeah, it was behind a cable that was put in a different place for my EV charger. And I've filled that up nicely. But I've got this dryer vent. Well, it's been put in, I don't know when they put it in, probably decades ago. But I wondered, what is the best dryer vent? Because I'm leaking air. I don't want to. I want to have an airtight house, and that's it goes outside. So what am I going to do about that? Well, it is a styrofoam ball. Okay, about I don't know, as big as a small bowling ball or something like that, maybe smaller. But the air pushes it out, and then it rolls back in place and seals up. Like
interesting. Well, there's sewer drain like this that have a ping pong ball in them. Have you ever seen those?
No.
We have a problem in our city sometimes with sewer backup. If there's too much rain, water will come out of your drain, like in your furnace room. So you get this thing, it's a ping pong ball in a little cage. You screw it into your floor drain, and normally water can just go into the drain and drain as normal. But if there's a flood and it starts to back up, it pushes the ping pong ball to the top and prevents water from coming in your house.
Well, I've got very thick walls in the house, and I wondered, is this the best way of doing it? So I looked it up on the internet for the first time in, maybe 10 years to see what passive houses use, and they came up with this thing. It's still the same thing, and it doesn't seem like an ideal way of doing it because it's not airtight. And I'm concerned about rodents too getting in or anything like that. But it had broken quite a few years ago so that it didn't go back into place. There was a little piece of styrofoam that broke off somehow, and it didn't roll back into place. So it's been like that for a long time. And I finally said, this weekend, I got ambitious and I said, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to hot glue some styrofoam chunks from a foam core together and make it roll back into place. So I did that and it worked.
Nice.
But I checked on it this morning and there was warm air blowing. I thought, what, does my wife have the dryer on? She hadn't left for work yet. And no, it wasn't, because it was like half of what the dryer puts out. It was just air from the house, the furnace, pushing air into the house. For some reason, I don't, maybe people listening understand this, but when the furnace is on, it creates pressure in my house, even though there's not a huge air intake. It's just air intake for the combustion because it's a high efficiency furnace. I don't know why the pressure of the house builds up when the air furnace is on. Maybe it's a naive question, but anyway, it tells me that there's a leak in the vent because the dryer door was closed and it seals pretty well. It's a modern dryer. So there must be a leak in the vent between the dryer and there, and the pressure in the house is getting in there and pushing out that ball.
Huh.
So now I have to, our house, we don't have a basement or a garage, so all of our house is just completely cluttered and filled to the roof with crap that I occasionally try to take to charity whenever my wife will let me. But it was rare, but that happened this weekend too, so it was a good weekend. But now I got to find a leak in the dryer vent and seal it up good with some furnace tape.
Yeah, well, I think the best dryer vent is no dryer vent, which is, we talked briefly about heat pump dryers, and one of the main benefits of a heat pump dryer is there's no venting to the outside at all, which is where you lose a lot of your energy for your house. It's really just a condensation thing where it collects the water from your wet clothes and it ends up going into a container or down your drain. there's other things about them, but not having to vent them is one of the main benefits. And there's some people that, I don't know, it can depend on your house. Like sometimes it's really difficult to even vent a dryer depending on where you want to put it. But, one of these, you can really put it anywhere. You can put it in your bedroom closet if you want, because it doesn't need to be vented to the outside.
Yeah. And one time in my old house, I tried one of those dryer vents that actually vent into the house. They've got a lid trap on them.
Yeah.
But you're putting moist air into the dryer room, and then that dryer takes that moist air and tries to dry your clothes. So it doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And I wasn't it was a fairly dry house because it was very leaky. So the furnace was on all the time, drying out the house in the winter and spring and fall. And so it didn't seem like a bad idea to have humidity in there. But this house is more airtight, so it doesn't seem like a great idea. You know what? We talked about electric Zambonis on the show before. Well, there was a story in the news, then we're doing a lot of local stuff this week. A town called Wacow had a rink. A lot of towns in our Canadian agricultural province here on the plains have ice rinks in them. That's kind of the center of the community, and they play hockey and skate, and sometimes they're curling rinks and things like that. Well, every town worth its salt has a rink, and it has, I guess, a bunch of people, young people playing hockey, got poisoned by the Zamboni. They discovered that it was the Zamboni. They weren't sure at first. They thought it was the furnace, but it was the Zamboni, which is a combustion vehicle, was emitting too much carbon monoxide, and everyone got sick. They realized it because the people who were in the locker room where has the most of the furnace didn't get sick, but the people who were on the ice actually got sick in the main place where the rink was.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this before, and I have, very strong memories of when I was a kid. I used to play hockey, so I was in these rinks all the time, and I remember even thinking as a kid, wait a minute, should we really have a gas-powered vehicle driving around the ice, cleaning the ice? This seems weird, and it always smelled disgusting after the Zamboni, if you happened to play right after the Zamboni cleaned the ice. And yeah, this has happened before where, people get sick from the gas-powered Zambonis. And they do make electric Zambonis, which we have mentioned before on the show.
Now, they're pricey, and I'm not advocating for a small town that can probably barely get by as it is to replace their Zamboni with electric one. But it's nice to know that they exist and that this is a problem that would be solved when Zambonis are electrified.
Yeah, or, leave the garage door open to the rink while you're cleaning the ice or something.
Yeah, I mean, what are they doing in NHL arenas? They must have better ventilation or, inside air brought in or something.
Yeah, better ventilation and just a lot more airspace. Like these small town rinks are not very big, so those fumes are going to collect.
So I don't know what they're going to do. Tune up the Zamboni, put carbon monoxide testers in there or something.
I mean, it sounds like probably it's running very poorly, because, I imagine they've been using the Zamboni for a long time without these kind of problems.
I was reading this just now. It's not an old Zamboni by any means, this article says. It has an annual maintenance. It's just one of those things that parts go and things need to be replaced. Thankfully, they caught the issues and traced it back to an issue they can fix. So maybe something went on the Zamboni, even though it is fairly new. We're not that far off from electric Zambonis probably being cheaper. The cost of ownership of them would be cheaper because you won't have to fuel it with expensive gasoline or anything, and gas is expensive in Canada.
Yeah, they wouldn't need a very large battery pack either because it only takes about 15 minutes to clean the rink, so you could get by with a small battery.
Edmunds tested electric cars and did a different kind of test. They tested how many miles or kilometers would they get after charging for 1 hour, and mine was right at the bottom of the list. Right at the bottom.
But you did successfully take that car on a road trip to Vancouver.
And it wasn't that bad. I would prefer a better one, better, faster charging one, but it wasn't as bad as you would think if you have time. The Ioniq 6 was the fastest they tested, and it comes in at 868 miles for an hour of charging. See, mine can't even charge to full in an hour. It takes at least an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
So the Ioniq 6 was the fastest, and that is 1,400 kilometers for an hour. Mine probably gets 350 or 300. Anyway, it's ridiculous. The Bolt gets 179 miles in an hour or 289 kilometers. And yeah, it's many times faster. So it's, I'm seeing signs that Hyundai and Kia are actually making lots of their EVs now, or at least some models they are. These, like the Ioniq 6 is sitting on lots. People aren't buying it.
We're going to talk more about Hyundai later in the show. They're on a bit of a roll. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this because I feel like I'm just giving free publicity to junk food purveyors. But this week in junk food news, Frito-Lay is now got a fleet of electric trucks. So their deliveries in North Carolina and South Carolina are going to be with this fleet of delivery trucks. They're going to put in about 800 miles a day. They're planning to expand this network. So right now they have 28 Ford E-Transit vans. These are not particularly long-range vans, but these are shorter-range kind of trips. So good on Frito-Lay, and I imagine they will discover that this is cost-effective and will roll this out. But anyway, the slightly more interesting fast food news this week, both these stories are from Electrek. Domino's, did you see this electric bicycle Domino's delivery bike?
No.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it now. It looks it looks fake. It looks like a rendering on a computer that would never be made. Is this real?
It is real. They're going to be deployed in Australia. So
okay, so I'm looking at an electric bike that has glowing rims, colored blue of the Domino's logo, and it's got this giant sort of bread box / mailbox hoisted up on the back, which sort of dwarfs the bike. It's got a Domino's logo on the back, and I take it that's the heating container that is at least the width of a large pizza. Yeah, and the headline says pizza oven, but I don't think it's really an oven. It's really more of a pizza warmer. Like there's a graphic here. It shows a picture of it, that it's heated to 68 degrees Celsius, which is 154 Fahrenheit. So you're not actually cooking the pizza at that temperature. You want to be 400 or 500 degrees. That's the warmer
heat.
plate. That's the warmer oven they would put it in while they wait for you to come by.
Yeah. Now, actually cooking them on the bike on the way would be super cool, but it would just take too much power. You would
boy, that would be fresh, wouldn't it?
It would be super fresh though. But you could certainly see them doing that in maybe something is more like a cargo bike, something bigger, basically.
You just came up with a brilliant idea, Brian.
Cook the pizza on the way there. Yeah,
the freshest pizza in town delivered on a bicycle that cooks it.
Yeah, and people would choose that. People are eco-conscious. They want to do the right thing for the environment. So, you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to stuff my face with a disgusting Domino's pizza. I'm going to want it to be good for the environment.
I take it you don't like Domino's. Not a Domino's fan.
Not a Domino. I don't think I've ever had a Domino's pizza. So,
oh, come on. You must have been at an event or something.
Yeah,
come on.
I guess probably somewhere. But
they're thin and tangy. There, I've said it. I enjoy them from time to time because we have a certain kind of style of pizza in our town that's different than everywhere else in the entire world.
Yes.
And this one the Domino's is kind of the opposite of that. So if you get tired of local style pizzas, which is barely you have to unhinge your jaw to get your mouth around it.
It doesn't say for sure, it sounds like these are rolling out right away, but it's a little bit vague on the details here. But this is for the Domino's Pizza. It's DPE, Domino's Pizza Enterprises. This is the territory covered by the Australian-based franchisee, but they are in other countries like New Zealand, Belgium, France. So, not in North America yet, but it sounds like they are on the way in Australia and other countries.
Well, I'm thinking high-density population places like Manhattan. I'm not thinking this is going to be in the burbs. You're not going to want to take a bike for too far in the burbs to get from one place to the next. Unless they have autonomous bikes in the future. Is that the future, Brian? Is autonomous vehicles bringing you a pizza that it cooks in the vehicle? In fact, it might sit in front of your house for like 5 minutes. The app says it sit in front of your house, but it's not quite ready. But you can go watch the cheese boil if you want.
No, it probably more than any other kind of delivery, like, cooking pizza on the way. That makes complete sense.
Yeah. All right, so it's time for everyone's favorite segment. This Week in Nuclear News. The United States and the United Kingdom, neither countries I would call united. You know what? They should take the word united out of both those countries, especially the United States.
Sure.
They're not united at all. It's kind of a joke. Just call them the states from now on, or the angry states. They're leading a pledge to triple nuclear power by 2050, and they're going to do this at COP28. So they want to triple the vows to triple the nuclear reactors that were there in 2020. The problem is that's going to require more than tripling them because there's a lot of reactors that are going to be retiring by 2050. So that gets even crazier. If this wasn't crazy enough as to begin with and unrealistic, I've read climate scientists say that this is bad advice that somebody in the White House is getting, that they should not be doing this. I'm not going to argue about it here on the show because I know there's a lot of nuclear fans. That's why we have this segment. But it's a bad idea. It's not economical. It's not going to work. The government itself won't spend the trillions it would take to do this, and private industry sure as heck isn't going to do that. They haven't been doing it almost ever without subsidies. So, it's the private industry has never done nuclear without subsidies because they don't want to assume any risk. So it's all a public thing, and there's no way the United States is going to put that much money into the reactors, tripling the reactors. It would be untold amounts of money. Most of the remaining operating reactors in the UK will be off-grid by 2028, with only Sizewell B hanging on until 2035, writes Clean Technica. All reactors had roughly a 40-year lifespan, not the 60 to 80 years often claimed by the industry, including the 60-year claim for Hinkley Point C. That's in the UK. The official estimate of the UK's Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, the NDA, was £149 billion. Assuming Hinkley Site C was rolled into that number, that would be a cost of £6 billion per reactor, or more than many nuclear advocates say is the cost of a plant to build one. So the decommissioning is more than what people claim is the cost to build them.
Yeah, and decommissioning oil wells is a crazy expensive thing as well that often gets absorbed by the taxpayers, unfortunately.
So Stephen Thomas, a professor of energy policy at the University of Greenwich and a regular analyst of the nuclear industry he is, and he has a different expectation of this. He thinks that it will cost 10.4 billion British pounds per reactor based on updated calculations, because some of the calculations are outdated. So, solution, put a deposit down. You can't build something like that because the taxpayer, if we did build nuclear, my grandchildren are going to be on the hook for decommissioning these suckers. And, what does it take to decommission a solar factory or a solar farm?
One of my favorite buildings of all time is the Moose Jaw Civic Center, which I think I've even talked about on the show because I made a video that's up on YouTube about the Moose Jaw Civic Center. It was torn down in 2012, I think. And I just bring it up because I just love the statistic that it was built by my favorite architect, Joseph Pettit. It cost $500,000 to build that building in 1959. And then it cost $2 million to tear it down.
Yeah.
A lot of time had passed. And so if you adjust for inflation, I imagine the teardown cost would have been less than the building cost. But I just think that's funny. $500,000 to build, $2 million to tear down.
I was reading the story about the new NFL stadium in, is it Buffalo or Detroit? It's like $1.6 billion. And it doesn't even have a roof. These monstrosities that they build in Texas for the NFL, they have a glass roof. Yeah. And my son says they don't want a roof because it gives them a home field advantage when all the other teams come and play up in the north.
Right.
This time of year and in January and, December. January if you're lucky. Okay, so Saskatchewan, that's our province. Say it with me, Saskatchewan, a province in Canada, will decide in 2029. I heard that on the news on the way over here. I was kind of relieved that it was 2029 because maybe they'll come to their senses, but they're already spending money on this,
Yeah, it's already costing us money, yeah.
And this is what I saw on Twitter, a quote from a story, news story. It says, the anticipated costs of SMRs to Saskatchewan taxpayers cannot be shared because of confidentiality agreements. Horse pucky. We know that it's a god-awful amount of money that you're putting into this or pretending that you're going to put in this so you can extend the life of fossil fuels. We're not going to build solar today. We know it's available, but we're going to wait for this other one because we think, that's more reliable and cheaper somehow.
Yeah, and we have a real problem in Canada with freedom of information. I don't know if you've been following this, but journalists have been working hard on this for the last few years. Robin Doolittle has written a lot of great pieces about this. Canada is not as open as other countries when it comes to getting information, freedom of information requests from government agencies and government departments. We're really bad at it. We're really good at keeping our secrets. And, you can push hard for years sometimes and just not get information that you
have
would
to spend
normally
money.
get.
It's ridiculous. It's a lot of money.
It's impossible for it. It's terrible.
Yeah, and then if you're lucky, you get it in a year. So it has to be overhauled.
All right. So shout out to our friend Sunny, who pointed me in the direction of this story. Sunny just got some solar panels on her house, or I think she put them on the garage, actually.
Nice.
And she's very excited about that. Looking forward to getting electric car.
So she's a friend of yours. I can't help but think that you inspired people, Brian. This is hard evidence that you are improving the world.
It's what I do. What can I say? Her solar inverter is from Solar Edge, and I have a Solar Edge inverter. I believe you have a Solar Edge. They seem to be the most popular brand of inverters for solar panels around here anyway. And you need the inverter because it's what converts the DC electricity of the panels into the AC electricity that you can use in your house or feed back to the grid. The inverter is the box that also talks to the grid. Anyway, these are not out yet, but this was announced a few months ago that Solar Edge is working on a bi-directional EV charger. And I thought this was really interesting for a couple of reasons. The first is this allows you to charge your car at home using DC power. And I don't think I've ever heard of that before. So
I have.
When you have,
I'll stop you right there, Brian. I have fully charged, had something on it about 3 years ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. But again, what's available in Europe, like they probably have a better dryer vent in Europe, is what I was trying to get at earlier.
Yeah.
A better ballast trap, better dryer vent. Everything's better in Europe.
No, it's true. They have much better choices, I think, for things like, boilers and heat pumps.
Energy efficiency, because again, natural gas is dirt cheap here.
Yeah.
I mean, we pay more at the pump for our gas, but natural gas is really cheap, at least in Western Canada.
No, and electricity is really expensive in Australia, which is one of the reasons that rooftop solar has taken off so much there. So anyway, yes, I had not heard of one of these before, but the idea is that your electric vehicle typically charges using AC power when you're at home and then charges with DC power when you're on a road trip and you're using a commercial DC fast charger. That's how you get, 50 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts. But at home, you're typically limited to like 7 kilowatts, 10 kilowatts, because it's got to run on the AC power of your house. But with this device, so the EV charger talks to the inverter, and it can feed power directly from your solar panels into your car. So basically, it takes your electric car and turns it into a home battery in a way that is hopefully going to be universal. We know that this exists like with the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck, that you can buy a connection with Ford so that you can use your F-150 as
I saw one
backup.
yesterday, by the way. I saw one at the Home Depot parking lot.
Yeah.
And windshield was completely smashed. Don't know what happened.
Not related to it being electric.
I hope not.
Yeah. But in any case, this combination of the inverter and the chargers turns your potentially any car that has vehicle-to-grid capabilities, which right now isn't that many of them. And it doesn't say in their press release like which cars this is going to work with. But the idea is that it's hopefully a kind of a universal solution that you can, in the future, take any car and use it as a home battery with this system. So you can charge it directly from the sun with DC power up to 24 kilowatts.
Plus, if you're dumping your solar into the grid and not getting paid well for it, which is anyone who has new solar like Sunny and where we live, they're not getting paid as well as our contract because they said we don't want electricity prices to go up if everyone goes and gets solar, which is a crockle.
Yeah, it's better to keep the power around here because they're only paying you half price for it at our local utility if you feed it into the grid. So this, on a sunny day at noon, and you've got your car at home plugged in, any excess power can go directly into your car and fill that up before you put any power back into the grid.
I love it. I like it.
Yeah.
And, congratulations to Sunny for listening to hear what we said about you. Good job. And now she'll inspire other people to do the same, and it'll keep spreading. All thanks to you, Brian.
Yeah.
All thanks to your courage of getting solar before anyone else.
Well, I don't like to use the word hero, but
But if you have to, whatever. Okay, it's time for the tweet of the week. Brian, the tweet of the week is from me.
wow.
James Whittingham.
I feel like this is rigged somehow.
Well, I wanted to mention it because it has 20,000 views.
What?
Well, as of this morning, this tweet has 20,000 views.
Wow, that's amazing.
Did not expect that. Did you liked it? Did you look at the view count when you liked it?
No, I didn't.
Well, it was at 18,000 yesterday at the time, and now it's at 20,000. And I don't know how that happens. And even my son says that for Twitter is very good. Not for TikTok, but for Twitter, very good.
I've never gotten any traction on Twitter ever.
I have occasionally. Usually when there's a tinge of political things to it, because there's a lot of angry political people on Twitter on my side of the aisle, but still they're there just to be keyboard warriors, and they like to, do their thing. The world's largest solar farm, this is me, James Whittingham, J.E. Whittingham. The world's largest solar farm just came online in the United Arab Emirates. They installed the equivalent of one of our local SaskPower solar farms per day. So the solar farms that we have here, I think there's 2 or 3 of them that are online now, and a couple more that have been, they're all 10 megawatts. We wouldn't want to make anything too big. We've got a big flat area of prairies that goes on forever, but we wouldn't want to make them too big. We're still a little unsure about this solar business that's been around for a long time. Oh, and by the way, we've got a letter that I almost forgot to mention on this week's show, so I'll get to that in a minute. It's about solar on the White House. We were corrected by somebody who was in the White House looking at solar. So we'll get to that
Obama?
in a minute.
Did we get corrected by Obama?
I think it was, but he used a different name.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
We get a lot of U.S. presidents pretending to be someone else who are listening to the show.
Sure.
Very common. So again, the world's largest solar farm just came online in the United Arab Emirates, and it was huge. And it took something like 7 months, and every day they installed one of our local solar farms, what we think. And I think that, but it's 2
10
gigawatts.
megawatts a day for months on end.
The peak output of this solar farm is 2 gigawatts, which is 2 nuclear reactors, high noon on a sunny day.
So, James, what of course the naysayers would say is, well, it's not sunny all the time, and what do you do for power at night?
Good question, Brian. You store it. There are various ways you could store it, and they're getting cheaper all the time and better. So, 2035, what will it cost to store grid energy in a chemical battery? Probably a quarter of what it does today. So, yeah, I don't, you have to look at where prices are going. I say it every week on the show, not where they are, but where they're going. And that affects your decisions. And that's why nuclear doesn't make any sense unless you want to spend money for no reason.
No, and I think it was Goldman Sachs just put out a report saying that battery prices are dropping faster than they predicted. They had to readjust their numbers. So battery prices are dropping. That's an easy, no-brainer way to store your solar energy.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because there was a mineral shortage for a while, and that sort of got caught up because of the pandemic. Yeah. So the prices went up, but they're talking about 40% decline by 2025, which we mentioned last week on the show.
It's amazing. All right, so couple of stories here from Electrax. So we've been talking about Hyundai a little bit. Hyundai seems to be on a bit of a roll when it comes to electric vehicles, and Hyundai Kia is kind of the same company, Korean car maker, and they're now next year going to start selling cars online through Amazon, which I think is really interesting. We've talked often about the dealership experience with cars, and it's not great, and it's particularly not great for electric cars because they tend to be in short supply, and salespeople tend to try and push you towards the gas-powered cars or the hybrids or the cars that they have in stock. So with Tesla, you buy your vehicle just on their website, but Hyundai's going to go through Amazon, which makes a lot of sense. Amazon is a hugely popular shopping destination, and if I had a choice between buying a car from Amazon or buying a car from my local dealership, I would absolutely 100% every time pick Amazon.
Absolutely. I hate dealerships.
Yeah.
I can't stand them. I mean, I've had relatively good experiences. Like my nephew went to buy a car once and they basically locked him in a room for 2 hours until he got the undercoating, and that's with his parents in the room who are no better. It's just,
yeah.
It was incredible. I was so thankful to buy the Prius at Toyota because you couldn't undercoat it.
And they put those toothpicks in his eyes and they forced him to watch propaganda videos about undercoating.
Yeah. And I got out of it with my Chevy dealer by saying I'm only going to own it for 3 years. I'm going to upgrade to the Equinox when it comes out, which was aspirational thinking. It's not necessarily going to happen, especially with the inevitable price increases that are going to happen with that car, but we'll see. I want to get out of it.
Other car makers have lately announced plans to kind of scale back perhaps EV plans, but Hyundai, Kia have said they are not doing that. They're going forward with it. The EV9 is coming out, I think, toward the end of this year. This is a very large SUV that's going to be available here in North America. But I thought this was interesting. They're launching the Kia EV5 in China. This is a small SUV. And the starting price is going to be $20,000 US.
Are you sure?
That's what it says here on Electrek.
Are you drunk? Are you on the meth again? What's going on?
149,000 yuan, which translates to 20,000 US dollars. That is the starting price. Of course, a lot of cars don't sell that many at the starting price. But yeah, I don't know why we don't have cars with that kind of electric cars with that kind of low starting price here in North America.
What did they anticipate? That would be like perhaps $28,000 United States, and they would sell a boatload of them every second if they could do that.
If they could do it, yeah. And I don't know. It's not out yet, but it seems like a decent car with decent range and different kind of range options. So the price would go up from there. And they wouldn't maybe sell many of the bottom trim. They try not to sell a lot of cars at the bottom trim. This is typical kind of strategy. Okay, so more Canadian news here in Canada, here in Western Canada. E1 Molly Energy has announced a $1 billion battery cell plant for British Columbia. This is near Vancouver in Maple Ridge. And there's a $204 million grant from the federal government that is going into this. But the whole thing is going to be about $1 billion, and it's going to support the production of, it's going to have create 350 jobs and produce up to 135 million high-performance lithium cell batteries, primarily for electric vehicles.
All right, let's dip into the mailbag. A letter I almost forgot about. And thanks to everyone who sent us letters this week. We really appreciate that. But yeah, I did want to mention this one. I had a busy week, and then I was going to get back to this person and ask for more information. So if you're listening, Paul, send us some more information. I'd like some color. If you have any details about this at all, I found it interesting. He says, firstly, I really enjoy listening to you two on your show. You seem to do well addressing real subjects in a fun way. Thank you. That is what we do. That's our trademark. I'm sort of going backwards as I'm all caught up with the newer podcasts. I like it when people do that, although sometimes I feel sorry for them because, I could only stand so much of myself. I'm back at the solar removal from the White House. Someone probably alerted you, but in case they did not, it was definitely hot water solar and not PV solar. So it was the Jimmy Carter installed solar panels in the White House, and then Ronald Reagan took them off.
Yes, and we talked about this on the podcast a year or two ago, I think.
Oh, yes. Probably a number of times, actually. It's probably been come up from time to time again. And I probably, I was unclear. And I did some reading on it, and I actually couldn't find out. It didn't specifically say PV. So I was kind of curious if it was PV, what the panel sort of efficiency would have been back then.
Yeah. And back then, it would have been certainly more common to do solar hot water rather than PV, because PV wasn't fully developed. It was really, really expensive. But just putting up coils on your roof to collect hot water, that was a lot easier and more of a no-brainer at the time.
My house was in the late 70s in response to the energy crisis of the 70s. There was a couple of oil shocks in the 70s, and people built this passive solar house in 1979. And it had not PV, because PV wasn't practical back then. I found out later that it was, I haven't talked to the original owners, but I found out later that it was actual thermal. So it preheated sort of water and air on the side of the house, this big black panel on the side of this huge monolithic house.
Yeah. And when I first looked into solar for my house, it was probably when we bought this house in around 2006. And I talked to a guy who was at the time one of the few solar installers, and he was pointing me towards thermal solar because, PV solar at the time. So if I had done solar in 2006 in my house, it would have been thermal, hot water solar.
Because solar wasn't, practical. It wasn't economical until the teens, basically. And that's when you got it, as late in the teens. And, you and I were following it month by month to see when they're coming down, because there was this term called grid parity that we were all waiting for. When was solar going to be the same price as grid power? Well, that's long past. That's way in the rearview mirror. But here's the kicker from Paul, who wrote us. He says, when Clinton decided to add PV, which I imagine was the late 90s or 90s, which I don't even know about. I don't, or I've forgotten. Anyway, it sounds a little familiar. So Bill Clinton must have added photovoltaic solar panels to make electricity for the White House. He says, when Clinton decided to do this, I actually went on site to the White House to bid on that job. It was very cool. Anyway, it's this part where it says very cool. I want you to elaborate on that, Paul. Send us another letter if you can and let us know. Anyway, keep up the great work. Love the show. Thanks, Paul. That was a great letter. And always great to hear from our listeners on anything that you have to say or think or criticize or suggest. Keep them coming. Thank you. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The best-selling car in America is the Toyota Camry, and it will be only available in the hybrid version starting for the 2025 model year, according to CNN. Brian, Taylor Swift canceled a concert in Brazil after a fan died. And this is climate change. Apparently, it's been very hot in South America, up to 46 in places. And a fan died. So she was distraught and canceled that concert. I thought I'd throw that in for the Swifties out there. A lot of our listeners are Swifties. Probably like 40-50% of them.
Sure.
Okay. You're not going to challenge that. Okay. Cruise CEO and co-founder Kyle Vogt is quit. I saw his tweet.
We were talking about the troubles that they've had. So now the CEO is gone, presumably as a result of those troubles.
And they've were lying to regulators in California. And this, I don't know how to describe this, but it is a headline from Electric with a picture. Man tows boat with tiny electric scooter. And I just thought I'd mention that because there was a man towing a boat on a boat trailer with a little electric scooter.
Yeah, well, electric motors are surprisingly powerful.
Powerful, yes. Time for a CES Fast Fact. Africa is made up of 50 countries with more than 1.3 billion people. 50 countries, 1.3 billion. And a lot's going to happen this century with Africa, and we'll actually get to some of those stories, I hope. On November 18th, temporarily, planet Earth took its first step over the 2-degree Celsius barrier of heating. It will go backwards, but it is temporarily there. depressing news, obvious. Oh, temperatures reached 46 degrees in Argentina this week, causing citizens to vote for a crazy libertarian, Brian. I assume it was the weather. Libertarian who wants government out of people's lives, but not out of their uteruses, or is it uteri, as he wants to ban abortion. Toyota is going to build new batteries in their new North Carolina battery factory with recycled anode and cathode components from their old vehicles. And that sounds like BS to me. I know I'm anti-Toyota these days, but I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. What are you going to do? Throw a couple of pounds of stuff in and call it recycling? How do you get it from your old cars? Where are these old cars coming from? How do you source it just from your own cars in the graveyards of recycling batteries? Okay, if you take into account, and only partially, the cost of wanton environmental destruction, for which they pay zero for, Exxon, Shell, BP, and Chevron have not made a penny of profits since 1985. If they paid for everything they did, they wouldn't have made a profit since 1985. And that gets back to our story about, how energy companies don't pay for the cleanup when they're done, or the environmental costs.
James, I have some breaking news.
Okay.
I had a vague memory that Toyota had maybe struck a deal with Redwood Materials to buy
correct.
recycled.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's apparently where they're going to get some of these.
But how does Redwood just say, "Oh, this is just from Toyota"? And is there enough out there to even make an entire battery for one car?
Seem likely. Battery recycling is in its early days, but Redwood
partially because there's not a lot of batteries out there. My car is an early electric car, relatively of the modern era. It's still running, and I'm hoping it, knock on wood or anything else I can find, that it keeps running for a while. And finally this week, Nigeria has ended fossil fuel subsidies, while solar energy is experiencing a breakthrough moment there, according to Clean Technica. This is from Clean Technica. Nigeria is that continent's largest producer of crude oil, yet it has no refineries of its own, which means Nigerians pay exorbitant prices for gasoline and diesel fuel shipped in from first world countries. To offset some of the sting of high prices, the government has resorted to subsidies for more than 3 decades to keep prices at the pump low. Until recently, they cost the government about $522 million each month. In 2022, Nigeria spent $9.7 billion to subsidize imported gasoline. Nigeria also suffers from the lack of reliable electricity grid. To cope, Nigerians often rely on portable gasoline generators. When Nigeria's new president took office in May, the first thing he did was scrap the subsidies to fossil fuels, but that caused gasoline and diesel prices to spike 175% overnight, disrupting the economics of a nation that depends on portable generators. Prices have risen even further since then. In Lagos, about 70% of households aren't connected to the grid at all. The lucky few with connections contend with blackouts lasting more than 12 hours a day, so why bother connecting to the grid? The national grid delivers only 1,000 megawatts to a city of 25 million people. Wow. By contrast, Shanghai, with roughly the same population, supplies more than 30,000 megawatts at peak demand. So 30 times the supply in Shanghai as a city of the same size. A consultant in New York estimated as recently as 2019 that Nigeria had a fleet of 22 million small gasoline-powered generators. In all, these low-power generators emitted 51 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually, which is roughly equal to all the emissions produced by New York City. People across the city are adjusting to buying petrol for more than triple the price of what it was only 4 months earlier, but they're actually not protesting like they were, I think, a couple of decades ago when they did this the first time. And they rolled it back. The new reality has prompted dramatic changes in Nigeria's solar outlook by putting the cost of electricity from sunlight on par with unsubsidized gasoline, which is why we need to unsubsidize fossil fuels. Yeah. Days after the government ended the fossil fuel subsidies, energy researchers at Bloomberg New Energy Finance revamped their projections and put the country on path to reach 1.6 gigawatts of solar capacity within a year. And that is triple the previous forecast of what it was going to reach within a year. It's amazing.
When you pay the true cost of fossil fuels, they're not so attractive. And it makes you do other things and do them quickly. And that's our show for this week. Please take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and around social media, we are Clean Energy Pod.
And thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel if you want. It's got special features and clips from the show. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. Have a look at the Clean Energy store. We have merchandise. Very satisfied customer bought a shirt last week. Says it was very soft on Twitter.
Nice.
Said it was very soft. I wasn't sure because I don't own one. What am I, rich like our listeners? I don't own my own shirts. They said it was very soft. I said, does it itch? I said, does it mention was child labor involved in the label? He said, no. So it sounds perfectly good. Get yourself a Clean Energy Show t-shirt or a hat if you can, or a mug. If you're new to the show, subscribe so you get your podcast app to get you new episodes delivered every week, and rate and review us on iTunes, and we'll be very grateful. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.